Hello and welcome to the video. This tale is titled, A Selfish Sellsword. It is the 5th part in a 6-part series. If you have missed the previous story, consider going back and watching An Honest Thief. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or comment any feedback you may have, or consider subscribing as there will be more tales to come. The night was cold and the air still. The main street that ran through the roughest part of Arun High was empty. At this late hour, one would not expect to see another soul in these streets. Even the city guards thought twice about entering this neighborhood after dark. Down an alleyway off the main street, a side door burst outward at the kick of a steel-shod boot, and 2 burly men emerged. Between them, they carried a squirming man who they tossed into the desolate alley.
"And stay out, you useless vermin,"
spat one of the guards as they closed the tavern door behind them. Very slowly and with much effort, Taran got to his feet, swayed, then stumbled into the main street. Turning around to face the front door of the establishment, he shouted,
"Yeah, well, you don't know the difference between an honest tussle and a proper fight, mate."
Swinging his body around, he began to wander down the street, tilting to the left and right as he walked. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, a muscular physique and a shaved head, which made him seem older than he was. There was a large scar on his lower lip, the result of a spear point breaking through his helmet's chin guard. The cut revealed some of his bottom teeth, giving him a permanent snarl that his light brown, medium-length beard could not hide. His outfit was that of a military man, leather armor with gold trim, over a padded tunic and mail shirt. The golden embroidery on his chest marked him as a member of the Forgotten Sons company. Strapped to his left hip was a razor-sharp bastard sword, and on his right, an equally sharp dagger. As he walked, his large, round shield clanged against the floor. All of that garb meant that when the 2 gentlemen had tossed him into the alley, he had fallen hard. His right wrist was swollen and bleeding, and his right shoulder was dislocated. But Taran seemed unbothered as he stumbled down the street. Eventually, he found a stable with some old hay piled into one corner and passed out face first. He awoke with a grunt as someone kicked him hard in the lower leg.
"Get up. I wouldn't let my dog sleep in this manner."
The man standing in the sunlit archway was of equal build to the man lying on the floor. The rugged man could have been Taran's father in years and looks, and he wore almost the same garb. Only the emblem on his chest set his clothing apart from Taran's. All the men of the company wore the golden Ouroboros in the shape of a figure 8, but this man's serpent had wings, indicating his seniority. Taran raised his head slowly as he gained consciousness, and his wrist and shoulder burst with pain as he rolled onto his back, covering his eyes with his fully functioning left arm.
"Boss, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?"
Taran groaned.
"I thought you went back for another month or 2.
"I was indeed, but by the state of you, clearly it was a blessing I'm back sooner rather than later. Haven't I always told you to look after yourself, because no one else will? Here, let me give you a hand." The older man pulled him to his feet, and Taran grunted with pain, his limbs protesting as he burped out a request.
"Could you give me a hand with this shoulder? Since I fell from that horse, it seems to pop out whenever it feels like it."
"Sure, but you ought to be more careful, you know. That's if you want to see my age." Without ceremony, the older man with a practiced grip proceeded to reseat Taran's shoulder. There was a sickening crunch of muscle and bone, but Taran laughed as he spoke.
"And end up a grumpy old man like yourself? God spare me from that fate. For all your wisdom, Thama, you do talk a lot of dung."
Thama smiled wickedly before replying.
"And you, my bleary-eyed friend, are an idiot. Come on, I'm gathering the company for a little chat."
The older man gestured to the door of the stables.
"You're lucky I found you while I was tending to my horse. What did you do to yourself last night? Surely you haven't spent all your time in golden taverns."
The two men walked, one much slower than the other, around to the front of the building, while Taran replied,
"Me? No, I ain't that stupid. You taught me well enough to always keep my coin until there's another posting and more coin is guaranteed. No, those idiots over at the Hen's Roost don't know the difference between an honest rumble and a full-blown fight."
Pausing, the men smiled at each other.
"They thought I meant to have the head of the man who spilled my drink. I only wish to show him some manners. Well, after you hear what I have to say, you won't be doing any more roughhousing with the locals."
Looking puzzled, Taran stopped as Thamar opened the door into the dark warehouse. The Forgotten Sons Company had made it their home these past months. All in all, there were about 50 men-at-arms remaining. Others had died in one way or another, or they had left to fend for themselves. The only concern was that not many had actually joined in recent times. The company was a well-respected mercenary group, known for getting the job done. Once coin had changed hands, of course. They were some of the toughest and most fearless men in the land, and they had fought for whoever had the deepest purse. However, in recent times, the company had faced some serious misfortune. King Ventus had issued them a contract. Under pain of death, they were to sack a small town in a neighbouring kingdom to the north. This town had been reported to have intimate details about the king's plans. Supposedly, the town had also been aiding a notoriously cruel and bloodthirsty group of bandits who operated in that part of the world, the Hanged Men. So, half of the coin had changed hands, and the company had put the entire population to the sword, before torching the town in search of these bandits. It was only later that the company had found out that they had been used as a pawn in some sort of game to antagonize the king's rival into an all-out border war. The king had refused to pay the company the remaining coin, and had threatened to kill every second man if word got out that the crown had been involved with the slaughter. So, the company was forced to take the burden on in silence. Since then, they had been blacklisted from most of the honest jobs. The gigs that were left to them were too dark for the company to participate in. They were a group of cutthroats and killers, but their boss always tried to keep his men as respectable as mercenaries could be. The warehouse had been converted into a sort of military camp, equipped with a smithy, sleeping quarters, and a training ground. The group of men halted their various activities as the doors swung open and Thamar stepped in. As the men gathered at the base of the front stairs, Thamar's voice echoed out.
"I know I wasn't due back for a while, but I hope you've all been on your best behaviour since I've been gone."
The men chuckled and grinned at one another.
"It's only been that fool getting up to mischief,"
one of the men in the back shouted out as he pointed at Taran, gaining him a laugh and a pat on the back from a fellow mercenary.
"Yes, I've just been informed of his recent misdeeds."
As the boss talked, he turned to smile at Taran, then carried on.
"Listen, men, the reason I'm back early isn't a good one, so clear the dust out of your ears and properly take in what I'm about to say. Due to our current situation..."
With that word, the men murmured disparagingly to one another.
"Not one of the other kingdoms will take us on for a job, neither will the guilds or the larger companies."
Pausing to catch his breath, the boss continued.
"So I've come up with a plan to get our names cleared. I've heard the commander of the city guard is dead, the captain of the Arundel army has disappeared, and all the old guard army veterans are scattered to gods know where. This can only mean one thing, lads."
As he spoke, Thamar began to pace back and forth.
"Dear old King Ventus must be running out of people he can trust. I propose that now is the best time to strike. We'll pull off a job that will either clear our names or bring that tyrant to heel. Either way, it works for us."
The men grew even more excited and flocked closer as the boss paused yet again, reeling them in.
I say, we kidnap the princess.
At this proclamation, the crowd started to murmur rather than burst out with enthusiasm.
I know it will be challenging, and it's certainly not our usual gig. But if we ransom her back and force the king to publicly admit he screwed us and sullied our once beautiful names.
Now the mood started to rise. Thama raised his voice passionately.
He has expanded his kingdom off our backs, and all the while we have sat in poverty.
A cheer of assent rang out from one of the men.
It's time we were rid of this place once and for all. We are sellswords and bloody good ones. I say we pull off this job, then we set sail with the spoils and look for work elsewhere.
More of the men began to shout their agreement. The boss ceased his pacing and puffed out his chest as he wrapped up.
A change of scenery will do us wonders, boys, and if all goes to plan, we will have enough money to properly set ourselves up in a castle or manor. No more wallowing in the dirt like common fools. No, gentlemen, if we are victorious, we will be living like kings come winter.
As Thama finished his speech with gusto, the men cheered for their leader and clapped each other on the back.
Who are we?
The boss shouted as he jammed both fists down on his hips.
Your worst nightmare,
the men shouted in unison.
Now I would like all the officers to meet me in my quarters so we can get to planning. We are nearly on our journey to becoming rich men.
There were more shouts from the men as Thama walked down into the group, and they all clapped him on the back as he passed. The boss, Taran and the other 3 officers made their way through the crowd and up to the loft on the other side of the warehouse. It had been converted into a small meeting room and an apartment for the boss. Once they were all inside and the door was closed behind them, Thama leaned over a circular table and addressed the ranked men.
All right, lads, here's how it's going to go down.
The men sat down and listened closely. A week went by as they gathered the necessary information and plotted their routes. Finally, the hazy morning came when their plan was to be put into action. Half of the company would be tasked with getting inside the walls and capturing the princess, and the remaining half would be stationed at the docks. Their intention was to steal a ship they had scoped out beforehand and sail it into the bay where they would be protected and their prize should go unnoticed. At that stage, groups could go ashore and carry out the ransoming part of their plan without worrying about the princess being discovered. Taran and his group were stationed at the docks, where they were lying in wait for the signal to take the ship from its current owners. Peering out of the alleyway's entrance, Taran noticed the ship's crew and captain were all standing on the docks with puzzled looks on their faces. The ship was nowhere to be seen. Turning to his men, Taran relayed the new obstacle in hushed tones.
All right, lads, new plan. We need to find another ship. This one is scarpered. I want you 2 to head left around the docks, and you 2 right.
Without question, the 4 men Taran had pointed to stepped forward.
Return only once you've found a ship that suits our needs, and that we can take with ease.
Not needing to be dismissed, the men were away.
You 3 are to head up to the walls of the palace. Our boys will be pouring over them any minute now, princess in tow. You're to tell the boss the change of plans, and that if we haven't located another ship, they should meet us back at headquarters.
Again, the chosen men were off.
The rest of us will head back there now, and wait until we get some good news. We're creating too much suspicion or waiting around here. Go, men, quickly does it.
With the final command, the group disbanded, and the 18 men headed back to their secluded warehouse. Once all of them were inside, Taran stood guard, leaning against the front door as he waited for news. More time went by than what should have been necessary, and Taran began to grow concerned.
They cannot have all taken this long to return. Something has happened,
he thought to himself as he darted inside, where his men were fidgeting in expectation.
All right, lads, I'm going to check out what's happening at the palace. One of you can head to the docks. Keep an eye out for anything odd. I have a bad feeling about this.
The volunteer got to his feet, and the pair proceeded up the front steps. Suddenly, The front doors blew apart as a shockwave rushed over the men. The blast was followed by a yellow gas that flooded into the building. As it reached each of the men, they doubled over in soundless shrieks. Somehow, Taran was able to recover quickly, and he moved to help the man closest to him. The man was writhing around on the floor, with a ghastly look of terror on his face. His hands were cupped over his ears, and his mouth gaped as a noiseless scream tried to escape his mouth.
"Don't worry about him. He will be dead before long,"
echoed a cold and sinister voice coming from the shattered doorway. A slender old man with bright green eyes and elegant robes glided onto the front doorstep.
"I am the High Channeler of this city, and you and your friends have certainly been up to no good."
Taran looked up. The gaunt man was framed in the doorway.
"I don't care who you are. Release my men at once,"
Taran ordered as he bent back over his fallen comrade. The High Channeler gave an ugly laugh.
"You know, I don't think I will. The promise was for only half the men to be left alive, and I already have enough in custody."
"You heartless old wretch," Taran barked out as the man at his feet started to bleed from his eyes, mouth and ears. While he looked down in horror, one of the smaller side doors opened, and a heavily injured man leant against the door jamb. It was one of the company's officers who had been tasked with kidnapping the princess.
"Taran, it was a trap. None of us stood a chance. I was sent to..."
As he said this, he was pushed through the door opening roughly, and he collapsed onto the ground. Behind him, 15 city guards poured into the building, along with the newly appointed commander of the guard, Gilbert, who ran his sword through the prone man's back as he entered.
"You bastard, I'll kill you for that,"
Taran hissed through clenched teeth.
Now, there's no need for threats,"
the High Channeler said, grinning. Surrounded, Taran unbuckled his sword belt, letting it fall to the ground. He kept his tan-coloured eyes narrowed on the slender man and pointed his finger at him.
"Mark me, you will rue the day you cross the Forgotten Suns. I swear it on all the gods that have or ever will exist." "Oh, come now, it was inevitable,"
the High Channeler said with a smirk.
"Did you really think the butchers of Underhill Valley would go unpunished?"
Taran winced at the name.
Your king knows that isn't the full truth." "The king has deemed it a satisfactory punishment that half of your little gang will die, and the other half will be enslaved in the work camps. As for you..."
The High Channeler pointed at Taran.
"A special consideration has been made for you. You are to be sent to our political prison. How lucky."
The High Channeler's voice twisted in mock discomfort as he continued.
"Of course, there is an understanding that if you breathe a word of this to anyone, the rest of your men will be executed. Does your thick skull comprehend?"
Smirking, the Channeler paused, allowing Taran to muster a reply.
"I understand plenty. Never trust a king."
With the last word, Taran spat on the floor. Tears began to run down Taran's face as he watched so many of his brothers in arms dying in such an undignified and cruel way. Fury stole over him. He kicked his sword belt into his hands and drew his blade.
"I am not some common pup you can just tuck away somewhere to be forgotten about. Either we all die here and now, or I do,"
he shouted as he began to turn on the spot, looking each guard in the face one by one.
"I hardly believe that will be necessary,"
said the High Channeler, and with a raise of his arm, Taran was frozen solid, rooted to the spot. The High Channeler gestured to the guards with his free hand, and the commander stepped over the bodies that littered the floor as if they were nothing more than debris and approached Taran, sword raised. He cracked Taran on the back of the head with the pommel, hard. At this, the High Channeler lowered his arm, and Taran flopped to the floor with a crunch as his right shoulder popped out of its socket.
The end.
This was a Tello Tale. Thanks for watching.